Using an electric linear actuator for your parking brake. Slide 0. For several years I was using the Franken Falcon as a daily driver. As such, I needed to get an annual safety inspection, and practically every year it would fail because of the parking brake not holding in gear. In Texas that is a requirement. As you know, these older cars with the pull handbrake like those on Falcons, can be very difficult to get set once they get some age. Slide 1. From an article on mustangsandfords.com they say, right off the assembly line, 65-68 Mustang parking brakes offered marginal safety. Dash-mounted hand brakes have never been effective, even under the best of circumstances. Slide 2. They aren't as useful as between-the-seat hand brakes either, due to mechanical advantage. To be valuable at all, a dash-mounted hand brake must be in the best possible operational condition. Slide 3. The 69-73-foot parking brake is more effective, thanks to the leverage and the strength in the left leg. Slide 4. So I decided to investigate the use of an electric linear actuator to set the park brake. One point of warning. It takes a bit of time for the brake to be engaged, so this is not suitable as an emergency brake. Truthfully, the original park brake was not intended as an emergency brake either. Once the cables get some age on them, there is not enough leverage to even use it as a park brake. Slide 5. Just last year a friend of mine used his 65 Ranchero to pull a small sailboat. He was complaining about the park brake having difficulty setting it while the Ranchero was on the launch ramp. I suggested we put a linear actuator in his truck, so we did. Slide 6. So I searched eBay and came up with a 1500N linear actuator 12 volts electric motor 330 lbs auto lift window door opener for under $50. This actuator uses polarity switching much like the new window motors. So any window motor switch can be used to appliance or release the brake. I happen to have a switch and mount leftover from the power window kit I put in the Franken Falcon. Wiring the switch and motor for the linear actuator is as shown here. Slide 7. You can decide whether you want to use a window switch designed for the reversing polarity, or the old-style window switch with the two relays. Or the dual pushbuttons for engaging and disengaging the brake. Slide 8. The first step in the installation was to remove the existing park brake handle assembly. There are 2 bolts on the underside of the dash and 2 nuts accessible in the engine compartment. Once the assembly is dangling, the cable needs to be removed from the assembly. Slide 9. Getting the cable, which has a ball on its end that fits into the handle shaft, can be quite tedious. I found that disconnecting the cable from the equalizer bar underneath the car behind the transmission would allow enough of the cable to be into the driver's floorboard to allow it easier access for removing the cable from the handle. Slide 10. At the pulley end of the handle assembly you will find a small hole that is intended to allow the ball on the end of the cable to come out of the handle assembly. Once the ball is out, the shaft on the handle is slotted to allow the handle and shaft to be removed from the housing. I found sometimes the hole in the handle housing is not quite large enough for the ball to be easily removed. Since we're not going to use the handle or the shaft, the hole can be drilled to enlarge it. Just be sure the handle is in a position so as not to damage the cable or the ball. Slide 11. Next we want to remove the pulley assembly from the end of the handle assembly. There are a couple of welds that can be ground out to accomplish this, or the tube can be cut off leaving a short section of tube. I prefer leaving a short section of tube for a cable guide. Slide 12. The next step is preparing the linear actuator to receive the ball on the end of the cable. There is a hole at the end of the linear actuator, however it is too small for the ball to fit into. So I drilled the hole out to where the ball could fit through the hole. I put the ball all the way through the hole and doubled it back, then secured it with a hose clamp. You may be tempted to grind a slot in the end of the actuator to install the ball the way it was installed in the handle shaft, but don't do that. The actuator shaft is actually a tube with a plug on the end. We tried that on the Ranchero to find out it just pulled the plug out of the end of the tube. Then we went back to the method I used on Franken Falcon. Slide 13. Next, mount the pulley assembly back into firewall with the two nuts removed earlier. Then mount the actuator to the underside of the dash using one of the bolt holes that attach the hand brake assembly. Wire up the actuator as shown in the schematic earlier and mount your switch somewhere and you're ready to park.